So before I had this thing tuned to where I had a pretty ideal switching waveform, or let's just say I was pretty close to switching at 0 volts. At closer inspection, about the 20 volt region is where I got that at. 20 volts, just letting the arc go to free air, I had the best switching. So in that scenario, I could run it really long time, very little heating in the MOSFET. Once I started to go over about 20 volts, I started to lose EVS. Basically what I've done now is just added some more capacitance on this shunt right here, and I've separated my rails. So I'm driving the logic, this little supply here, then I've got the coil powered. It's going to switch harder at the lower voltages, and I'm just going to sort of monitor to see how high I can bring the primary, see what voltage that capacitor swings to see pretty much at what point I can sort of tune in a 0 volt switching. It's going to be at about 16 volts or so. I don't know why it's so bright in here. Let's see, I've got my damn lights turned down. As usual, I'm going to kickstart it. So it's going, little bush there, and it's pulling about 20 watts, about an amp. You see that's the drain voltage in the yellow. So again, this is it's switching hard, and if I was to try to load it at this point, really have to load it down to get it to start getting closer to class E. So again, the idea is hopefully you'll start to get it the higher you go. So I'm just going to keep raising the voltage here. So at 30 volts, so we're not quite there yet, starting to get it. 125 volts on the drain. A little bigger bush there. Keep going up. So about 150 volts on the drain. 40 volts, about 72 watts, 39 volts or so. So it gets a decent little bush going there. Kind of kicked into like a different little oscillation there. So the way I've got this capacitor here, it's just sitting there touching. And that's what happened. It lost contact. So now with the capacitor back on, see with the capacitor off, I'm just going to show real quick. Without that extra capacitance, add the cap back on, you see it starts hard switching again. So the cap on is what I want for higher voltage. So I want it to be like that right there as I'm cranking that voltage up to the point where I start to see that ZVS. So I'm 170 volts on the drain now with that type of output. But if I load it a little bit, if I load it just perfectly, see I get the class E. So right about there, it's kind of hard to see. I start to get the class E, pretty damn close to it. About as close as I'm probably going to get. It's about 90 watts. So again, the free air right there at that output, it's still switching a little hard. It's fairly efficient, but it's still, the MOSFET is still, the gate is still cutting back on when there's voltage in that capacitor. So again, I've only got 200 volt ceiling or so with this 250. And if I keep going up, now I'm about 180 volts on the drain, 190. So something like that output, it's a little better, kind of hard to see. But something like that, as soon as I load it like that with my hand, now I've got perfect, almost perfect ZVS. Not quite. So keep going up, looks like. So 200 volts on the drain. So I've brought it to about 50 volts now. The drain, it could probably handle a little over 200 volts. But I don't want to push it too hard. So I can probably bring this, I don't know, 55, 60 maybe. And again, I still don't have perfect ZVS with that voltage that free air streamer, the resistance of that free air streamer, the frequency it wants to run at. But again, this, I could run that for a while off that little heat sink. Now it's the output. I don't know why that's not on. Trying to load it like that. It'll get it to switch a little better. But I don't know. I might be able to pull some arcs. I don't want to pull crazy arcs off this because I don't have an ideal setup with this in the feedback. It might lose feedback. So still flaky, thin arcs. But I could lose feedback with this current setup I've got, and it'll lock up because of the gate driver I've got. But again, so this is about 100 watts or so, 110 watts, maybe 115 or so if I bump it up a little bit more. Oh, can't go higher than that. Anyway, the point though, that's pretty cool. It seems like a decent setup, once I actually turn it up. And again, the idea there is you got this heat sink. This is a fairly small heat sink right here. I mean, it's not super tiny, but it's pretty small. Just got it taped down right now. But something like that, you could run that output for a while with just a single switch. Seems to run all right. Again, that's going to go in and out of ZVS. Seems like it's hard to sort of get that perfect. Maybe PLL would help. I'm not real sure. And I guess the idea is if I really wanted to, instead of a 200 volt MOSFET, go with like a 600 volt, 500 volt, maybe put a bigger heatsink on there, just sort of deal with the sacrifices and try to push, higher voltage to bring that drain sort of closer to the edge, maybe get, a few hundred volts on it. Through that process, just every now and then you'll have to deal with whatever losses accumulate from however you're loading it. But for the most part, I guess you'd be sort of in the region where it's still way more efficient than it normally would be.